The images from the FIFA World Cup in Qatar looked almost unreal. Bright stadium lights, new highways cutting through the desert, metro lines, hotels, towers, fan zones, and a country presenting itself to billions of viewers as a polished global hub. Qatar spent $220 billion on the 2022 World Cup, according to FIFA, making it the most expensive World Cup in history. But behind that display sits one of the strangest population patterns on Earth. In Qatar, about 70% of the population is male. That is not a small imbalance. It is not a normal demographic swing. It is a sign that something deeper is shaping the country from the ground up. In this video, you'll understand why this happened, who built it, and what this extreme gender gap reveals about the real engine behind Qatar's rise. Start with the headline number. As of 2021, about 70% of Qatar's population was male. The Qatar Planning and Statistics Authority estimated the country's population at 2.8 million in 2022. That means the gender split was not a minor quirk in a tiny sample. It was the structure of the whole country. At first glance, many people assume this says something about culture alone. That misses the real story. The 70-30 ratio is not mainly about birth rates. It is not mainly about local family size. It is not because Qatari citizens suddenly became a male-heavy society. The mainstream view, based on the research in front of us, is much simpler and more direct. Qatar's gender balance was reshaped by imported labor on a huge scale. This is where the country's social reality becomes very different from most of the world. Qatar's total population includes a very large foreign expatriate population. The user's research notes describe native citizens as only around 10 to 12% of the total. That means the large majority of people inside the country are not citizens at all. They are workers from abroad. That one fact changes everything. In most countries, the population is made up mostly of families who live there long term. In Qatar, the economic model brought in a huge workforce tied to jobs, projects, and visas. This creates a society where the official population count does not reflect a normal settled nation in the usual sense. It reflects a labor system. You can see that most clearly in construction. According to the Qatar Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in 2021, roughly 90% of the labor force in the construction industry consisted of foreign male workers. Not just foreign workers, foreign male workers. That matters because construction was not a side story in Qatar. It was central to the state's development push. Qatar was awarded the World Cup on December 2nd, 2010, becoming the first Arab nation to host the tournament. From that point on, the clock started ticking. A nation that is the smallest country ever to host the FIFA World Cup now had to prepare for a global event running from November 20th to December 18th, 2022. Preparation on that scale meant building fast. The research notes say major infrastructure projects began in 2013. Stadiums were built, hotels expanded, transport systems were developed, roads and urban projects accelerated. The country also tied this wider push to Vision 2030, a long-range plan focused on development, modernization, and sports. The result was a construction hyperboom. That boom helps explain why the male share of the population grew so extreme. When a country launches massive building programs in a short time, it needs a large labor force. In Qatar's case, that demand was filled mainly by men recruited for physically demanding, low-wage work. The research points to South Asia in particular, with workers coming from India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Pakistan, along with parts of Africa. This is the hidden economic engine behind the 70% figure. The skyscrapers in Doha, the stadium roofs, the roads, the hotels, the transit systems, even the polished image shown during the tournament all depended on labor imported from outside the country. And because that labor force was heavily male, the national population itself became heavily male. A lot of people talk about the World Cup as the reason for this pattern, and that is only partly right. The tournament supercharged the process, but the deeper story is that Qatar's rapid economic growth already relied on this model. The World Cup did not create the system from nothing. It exposed it to the whole world. That brings us to the most human part of the story. Why did these workers arrive mostly alone? The answer lies in the visa and sponsorship structure described in the research as the Kafala system. In simple words, this was a labor sponsorship setup that tied many migrant workers to employers and tightly controlled their legal status in the country. According to the research notes, many working-class laborers were legally barred from bringing their wives, children, or families with them. That policy point is one of the biggest reasons the numbers became so lopsided. If a country recruits large numbers of men for construction and similar jobs, and those men come without their families, the result is not just a workforce. It becomes a male-heavy population map. Entire communities form around dormitories, work camps, and labor housing. These are not balanced neighborhoods with schools, parks, and family life in the normal sense. They are temporary systems built around work. This is why the clean skyline can hide a second urban world. On one side, there is the image seen on television: glass towers, luxury districts, and packed stadiums. On the other side, there are industrial zones and labor camps built for the workers who made that image possible. Human Rights Watch was one of the groups that raised concerns about worker conditions in the run-up to the World Cup. The research notes mention reports of unsafe working conditions and lack of labor rights. By 2021, as final preparations were underway, global debate around Qatar was no longer only about football. It was also about the people doing the hardest work in the heat and under pressure. This is where a common belief should be challenged. Many viewers saw Qatar during the World Cup and thought the biggest mystery was how such a small state could stage such a huge event. The deeper mystery was different. How does a country of 2.8 million people become 70% male? The answer is that the visible spectacle rested on an invisible army of temporary labor. There is also a second perspective worth adding. Qatar did not hide its ambition to modernize. The research says the country invested over $200 billion in infrastructure after winning the World Cup bid, aiming to diversify and modernize its economy. Supporters of this model argue that the country used sport and infrastructure to rise quickly on the world stage. A FIFA spokesperson in 2022 said, "The success of the World Cup illustrates the power of sport to bring the world together, even in a place with a challenging demographic reality." That line captures the split in how Qatar is seen. One view focuses on engineering, ambition, and delivery. The other focuses on labor dependence, isolation, and rights. Both are part of the same story. The timeline makes that clear. In 2010, Qatar won hosting rights. In 2013, major projects began. In 2021, scrutiny over worker conditions and demographics intensified. On November 20th, 2022, the tournament began. On December 18th, 2022, it ended with Argentina winning the championship. The stadiums were full. The cameras moved on. The demographic reality stayed behind. The research notes say Qatar continued to address labor reforms in response to international scrutiny, and that in 2020, the country introduced new laws to improve conditions for migrant workers, though enforcement remains a concern. Since that point is marked unverified in the research, it should be treated carefully. What is verified is that scrutiny grew, rights groups remained focused on enforcement, and labor conditions became part of the global conversation around the tournament. There is one more social effect here. When a country has a population split this far toward men, daily life changes. Work, housing, public space, and community life all shift around that imbalance. The research notes say Qatar's high male population reshaped social dynamics and led to programs encouraging female participation in the workforce and society. That shows the imbalance is not just a statistic. It affects how the country functions. So when we ask why this World Cup country is 70% men, the answer is not hidden in biology or tradition. It is written into economics, migration, construction, and law. Qatar's population became male-heavy because the country imported a massive workforce of foreign men, especially for construction. According to the research, construction alone was made up of roughly 90% foreign male workers. Many could not bring families. The World Cup building boom pushed that system into overdrive. The polished image seen in 2022 was real. The stadiums were real. The roads and towers were real. But so is the labor structure underneath them. Global spectacles often show us the final product and hide the population system that made it possible. Qatar's 70-30 split is not a random fact. It is a clue. It tells the story of a country that grew at high speed through temporary, single male labor on a scale large enough to reshape the entire nation's demographics. Did you already know that the real story behind Qatar's rapid rise was written in that 70% figure?